Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Astraea first noticed Solon on a crisp October morning at the University of California, Berkeley, when a stray beam of sunlight caught the edges of his unruly dark curls as he strode into Doe Library. The campus was alive with fall's riot of gold and crimson leaves, students hurrying between lecture halls, and the faint hum of bicycles zipping past. Astraea, then a 19-year-old architecture major, was hunched over her drafting table, bleary-eyed from another all-night push to perfect her capstone design. Solon, a charismatic senior in the software engineering program, entered clutching a triple espresso latte, legendary fuel for late-night coders. Their worlds collided when his elbow nudged her precariously stacked set of neon markers, sending pinks and greens rolling across her sketch. "Sorry," he murmured, crouching to gather the spilled pens. His voice carried a warmth that matched his easy smile. Astraea looked up, startled, and found herself studying the gentle curve of his jaw, the spark in his brown eyes. "I'll make it up to you," he added, handing back her favorite charcoal pencil. Without quite understanding why, she nodded, touched by how sincerely he apologized. Over the following weeks, they discovered an uncanny synergy. Astraea needed help translating her building facade simulations into an interactive digital model. Solon needed architectural insight to add realistic geometries to his virtual reality art piece. Nights that had once been solitary became joint ventures. Huddled in Soda Hall's computer lab, they wrestled with code snippets and C80 blueprints, trading tips and laughter. She teased him about his perpetually sleeveless hoodies, despite chill winds off the bay, and he ribbed her about her postmodern Gothic design choices. Pizza boxes and empty coffee cups piled up as projects morphed into conversations about favorite films, family quirks, and secret dreams. Their midnight club, as Solon jokingly called it, expanded beyond schoolwork. Weekend taco runs on Telegraph Avenue, experimental s'mores by the fire pits in People's Park, swapping playlists that blended electronic beats with classic jazz. Together they explored Berkeley's hidden staircases, discovered seaside trails under the Golden Gate Bridge, and even attended underground poetry slams where Astraea read lines she'd never shared in the daylight. In each other, they found a confidant who celebrated triumphs, like when her laser-cut model of a community pavilion won a juried competition, and offered comfort during setbacks, such as his first bug-ridden app crash just before a major demo. Their bond deepened into something neither expected. Astraea taught Solon the thrill of watching sunlight dance across a vaulted ceiling. He showed her the exhilaration of a perfectly optimized algorithm. They began to imagine a shared future, weekend getaways to Big Sur, a joint startup blending her architectural visions with his interactive tech. Yet, beneath their optimism simmered a constant awareness. Life would pull them in different directions. In late February, the unthinkable happened. Astraea was driving home after a figure study marathon at the studio when another car veered into her lane on Highway 24. The impact was deafening. Metal screamed, airbags exploded, and the world tilted upside down. Solon, who had insisted on driving alongside her that night, escaped with minor bruises. Astraea endured a compound fracture in her left leg. When she awoke in a sterile hospital room, the white walls seemed to close in around her. His familiar presence by her bedside, holding her hand through each MRI, reading architectural journals aloud so she wouldn't feel isolated, became her lifeline. Released weeks later into a wheelchair, Astraea feared she would lose momentum in her career. Solon feared he had lost the only person who truly understood him. Yet neither faltered. He transformed his tiny studio apartment into her recovery suite, building a ramp at the door, installing custom shelving at wheelchair height, and stocking his pantry with electrolyte drinks and broth. She adapted her design process, switching to voice-commanded software and mastering a digital tablet with her one good hand. Their nights grew long, filled with whispered hopes and fears. And it was in those vulnerable hours that they discovered the resilience of their connection. When summer arrived, Solon received an invitation to pursue a master's degree in Toronto. Their choice felt monumental: commit to a long-distance relationship or part ways before too many miles lay between them. They chose to try. Goodbyes at SFO were tear-stained and bittersweet. He pressed a small, cast-wrapped envelope into her hand. "Open when you miss me most," he said. Inside were concert tickets for a Toronto music festival, his promise to remain her partner across any divide. The months that followed were a patchwork of video calls spun out to dawn, text threads stretching into the hundreds, and infrequent but fervent reunions. Astraea flew north to wander cobblestone lanes of the distillery district with him. He returned south to join her at Maker Faire, tinkering side by side. But every reunion and subsequent farewell carved a quiet ache in their hearts. They clung to the belief that 8 years of shared history could outlast time zones and cold autumn winds. As graduation loomed, they drafted blueprints for a joint future. Perhaps launching an urban design think tank blending her sustainable structures with his interactive installations. Over celebratory dim sum at Yank Sing, they toasted to every what if ever uttered between them. In the glow of those steamy dumplings, surrounded by professors and friends, they felt invincible until the final hour struck. On the night before commencement, Solon led Astraea back to the cluttered cafe where they first confessed their dreams. Beyond the windows lay the bay, its surface dark and unremarkable. He handed her a small leather notebook embossed in gold. Our blueprint. She opened it to find pages filled with sketches of improbable projects and margins brimming with side-by-side to-do lists. At the back, he added 2 words below her elegant title: "Together always." Tears filled her eyes as he closed the notebook and pressed his finger over her hand. Their pact, inked in that quiet San Francisco night, felt like a cornerstone for everything to come, a vow that no matter where life's currents swept them, they would forever return to one another. Little did they know the promise would soon face its sternest test. Yet in that moment, bathed in the glow of table lamps and the distant hum of the city, Astraea and Solon believed wholeheartedly that youth's bright promise would never wane. Astraea's pulse raced as she opened the wrought iron door of Latelier Bridal, stepping into a sanctuary of silk and lace nestled in San Francisco's Mission District. The industrial chic loft, with its exposed brick walls and polished concrete floors, felt more like an art gallery than a store. Sunlight streamed through steel-framed windows, illuminating rows of wedding gowns in ivory, blush, and champagne. Each dress hovered like a promise: sleek satin sheaths, voluminous tulle ball gowns, intricately embroidered lace creations. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, scattering prismatic light across the room, while a gentle piano melody drifted through hidden speakers. At 27, Astraea had replayed this scene endlessly in her mind. The soft whisper of fabrics, the glow of admiration in Solon's eyes, the moment she'd finally choose the gown that would mark the beginning of her married life. Messages of excitement buzzed on her phone, friends asking for selfies in the mirror, family reminding her to breathe and savor every moment. Yet now, clad in a simple slip dress and feeling vulnerable, she wondered if reality could ever match the fantasy. Vivian, the boutique's founder and head stylist, emerged from behind a rack. Dressed in a tailored black sheath with an effortlessly chic French twist to her hair, she exuded confidence. "Bonjour, Astraea," she greeted in her soft accent. "Today, we find the gown that will make your heart sing. I've selected 3 designs I believe will capture your essence." She swept a hand toward a trio of exquisite garments: a minimalist crepe sheath with a daring slit, a romantic lace frock draped in layers of tulle, and an architectural satin piece with sculpted folds reminiscent of a modern sculpture. Astraea followed Vivian into a private fitting alcove draped in dove gray velvet. The first gown slid overhead like second skin. She emerged to face her reflection. The sleek lines hugged her silhouette, The slit imparted an edge of confidence, and the off-shoulder neckline highlighted her collarbones. Turning slowly, she watched the fabric flow with every movement. Vivian's approving smile and Marisol's discreet thumbs up behind a rack affirmed it felt perfect. Astraea exhaled, a flush of happiness warming her cheeks. "Ready for the next?" Vivian asked. Astraea nodded, buoyed by the thrill of discovery. As she prepared to change gowns, a polite knock sounded at the door. Vivian gave her a gentle nod, anticipation coiling in the boutique's hush. Astraea's breath caught. Solon had arrived. When Astraea drew back the velvet curtain, her breath caught anew. Solon stood framed in the doorway, tall and dark-haired, his navy suit expertly tailored. His usual warm smile wavered, replaced by uncertainty. Heart-pounding, Astraea emerged fully into the room. The soft piano melody stuttered to silence, as if the boutique itself held its breath. "You look incredible," he managed, voice tight. He stepped forward, gaze flicking from her face to the gown's flowing fabric. Astraea felt a flutter of relief, until she noticed the hesitation in his eyes. "Absolutely incredible," he added, tone polite but distant. Her smile wavered. "Just incredible," she prompted, heart in her throat. "I thought you'd be thrilled." He ran a hand through his hair. Vivian and Marisol watched with discreet concern. "We need to talk," he said abruptly. The words echoed off the brick walls. Astraea's chest tightened. "Here? Now?" He nodded, eyes averted. "Yes." Astraea stepped off the pedestal, the gown's train slipping to the floor. She sank onto a cream leather love seat. Solon stood before her, shoulders slumped. The soft piano track faded entirely. "Astraea," he began, voice thick, "you've been my best friend since college. You've supported me through every career milestone, encouraged every dream. I love you deeply." Tears pricked her eyes. She closed her mouth against hope. "Then why?" He cut her off. "I can't marry you." Silence roared. Astraea's pulse thundered. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "I don't feel the way I thought I would," he confessed. "I feel responsible, committed, but not alive. The spark between us has gone out. I can't walk down that aisle and pretend otherwise." Astraea felt her knees weaken. The crystal prisms overhead seemed to dull. "Responsible," she echoed, voice brittle. "We built our life on love and passion. You promised me forever." He closed his eyes as though in pain. "I'm sorry." I tried to ignore the doubts, thinking they'd pass. But they only grew louder. "I can't lie to you, or to myself any longer." Anguish and betrayal surged through her. She rose, gown bag in hand. "Then leave," she said, voice trembling but firm. "Leave my shop. Leave my life." Without waiting for his response, she swept past him, dropped the gown bag on the floor, and fled. Astraea burst into the San Francisco afternoon, the gown's fabric trailing behind like a fading dream. Taxi lights blurred in her tear-streaked vision. She collapsed into the back seat, burying her face in her hands as the city's bustle pressed in on her. Messages of support flashed on her phone, friends worried, siblings begging for details. Each alert felt like salt in an open wound. She didn't respond. When she reached her apartment, she kicked off her heels and staggered inside. The foyer's cool tile felt harsh beneath her bare feet. She dragged herself to her bedroom, fumbling for her gown's bag, then released it onto the hardwood floor. The ivory fabric pooled at her feet, an emblem of heartbreak. Her vision swam. She stumbled toward the bathroom, seeking water or distraction, but the room tilted. Her head struck the countertop's edge with a sharp crack. White light exploded behind her eyes, then engulfed her completely. She awakened to a relentless beep, and 4 dripped into her arm. A monitor tracked her vitals. She lay on a narrow hospital bed, her head bandaged, her left leg supported by a rigid splint. The antiseptic scent of disinfectant filled the sterile room. A nurse hovered over her, eyes gentle behind a surgical mask. "You're awake," the nurse said softly. "You suffered a mild concussion and hip sprain." You're stable, but we'll keep you overnight for observation. The nurse glanced at a clipboard. Would you like me to notify Solon? Astraea's throat felt thick. She nodded. Minutes later, Solon slipped through the door. His suit was rumpled, hair disheveled, evidence of an anguished night. Guilt and relief warred in his eyes. He knelt beside her, voice cracking. Astraea, I'm so sorry. Tears welled behind her closed lids. Why? She rasped. Why tell me you didn't love me, then leave me alone? He swallowed hard. I froze. I was a coward. I thought leaving would spare you more pain. But then you got hurt. His words felt like a knife. I failed you. Astraea's hands trembled. You owe me more than apologies. He nodded, grief washing over his features. I'll spend every day making it right, if you'll let me. She closed her eyes against her pounding head. Outside, the city continued. A cable car clanged. A distant siren wailed. Inside, fractured hearts clung to a fragile possibility. By dawn, Astraea's scans were clear. Doctors arranged her discharge, noting she would recover fully with rest and therapy. Solon refused to leave her side, rolling her wheelchair down hospital corridors lined with floral get-well bouquets, a poignant counterpoint to the emotional wreckage they'd survived. They paused at the sliding doors opening onto a pale sunrise. Golden light spilled across the bay, illuminating the bridge's towers. Solon guided Astraea to a bench overlooking the water. He took her uninjured hand, voice earnest. I can't promise perfection. I can't erase the pain I caused. But I will never walk away again. I'll show you every day that you're the spark that makes me feel alive. Astraea studied his face, this man she'd loved since college, flawed and repentant, offering his heart anew. She nodded once, fragile and brave. One step at a time, she whispered. After a moment, she retrieved the bridal bag resting in the wheelchair's footrest. Solon watched, concern mingling with hope. Astraea opened it. The gown lay pristine, undamaged. She touched the satin cuff, voice gentle. One day, I'll try again. He smiled, relief and resolve dancing in his eyes. Whenever you're ready. They wheeled toward the parking garage, the gown bag swinging softly. The city awakened around them, streetlights fading, cable cars rattling into life. Future uncertainties lay ahead, but in that sunrise, two hearts renewed their promise to nurture the spark once lost, with patience and honesty. A gentle October morning bathed Grace Cathedral's soaring Gothic arches in soft, golden light as tens of white roses, hydrangeas, and eucalyptus branches lined the aisle. Organ music drifted through the nave, mingling with hushed whispers from well-wishers. Seated in the front row, family members exchanged eager glances, grandparents dabbing tissues, aunts smoothing their hats, uncles shifting in their seats. Astraea, Westwood stood at the head of the aisle, trailing a cloud-white silk gown edged in scalloped lace. Her veil caught the light, haloing her crowned head. At the center, Solon Gray emerged from the choir loft's shadow, tall, dark suit pristine, tie knotted with precision. His face brightened the moment locks of her hair fluttered under the high vaults. As she glided forward on her father's arm, every eye turned, every heart soared. Witnesses gasped at the impossible beauty of the moment. When Astraea reached the raised platform, Solon took her hands, his jaw set in a quiet smile that prompted applause. They spoke their vows, his voice calm, hers trembling, and exchanged rings under the stained-glass glow. A gentle flutter of rose petals fell as they shared their first, camera-flashed kiss. The couple turned to face the congregation, arms raised, iconic, triumphant, flawless. Applause thundered through the nave's ribbed ceiling, echoing as if the building itself celebrated. In that cathedral, filled with echoes of centuries of promises and partings, Astraea and Solon became husband and wife before the world. The celebration moved to the Sequoia Room at the Fairmont Hotel, where crystal chandeliers cast a mirrored glow over 50 marble-topped tables. Each place setting boasted personalized menus embossed in gold, heirloom tomato gazpacho, butter-poached halibut, dark chocolate tranche. Servers in crisp black vests glided between seats, refilling flutes of champagne and pouring estate-bottled Chardonnay. The newlyweds entered on a wave of cheering, greeted by camera flashes and heartfelt embraces. Astraea drifted from table to table, smiling radiantly as guests offered congratulations, college friends recalling late-night study sessions, colleagues praising her design talent, neighbors thrilled by their community's good fortune. Solon, ever the gracious host, shook hands, nodded at each anecdote, and chatted about their honeymoon plans in Napa Valley. Invitations to dance trailed behind them. College roommates insisted on swing tunes, cousins requested slow waltzes. Under pin-spot illumination, they appeared weightless on the dance floor. He leading with confident grace, she following with a soft smile as dangling votive candles flickered. Laughter and toasts crescendoed. To the perfect couple. May your love grow ever stronger. Cameras clicked, guests raised glasses, and the night shimmered with promise. Yet behind that veneer of joy lay silent fissures. In the days that followed, Astraea and Solon settled into their new life in the Pacific Heights penthouse that Solon had insisted on, a sleek, high-rise two-bedroom overlooking the bay. The brass and marble foyer led to a living room encased in floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge's mist-shrouded towers. Yet the expanse felt empty. Morning light revealed Solon's solitary figure across the room at a glass-topped desk, peering into his phone, tapping out work emails. Astraea sat at the breakfast bar in a silk robe, tracing the rim of her coffee cup, watching for a sign of his attention. He offered a polite, "Good morning, darling," then returned immediately to spreadsheets and schedules. He kissed her cheek, brief, distracted, and slipped into his convertible for a client's meeting in Palo Alto. Astraea watched him go, a hollow ache blooming in her chest. Days passed in a routine of silent breakfasts, separate commutes, and gracious nods at 5 o'clock receptions. They hosted a formal dinner for Solon's board of directors at the Ritz-Carlton, smiling stiffly amid lobster bisque and aged Bordeaux, but never once breaking character. Neighbors complimented their chemistry, blind to the polite detachment that reigned behind closed doors. Weekends offered no reprieve. One Sunday, Astraea suggested a sunrise hike in the Marin Headlands, hoping for side-by-side laughter. Solon agreed, still in his dress shirt and leather shoes, driving them to the trailhead. At the summit, the sun ignited a golden halo around San Francisco. The wind tousled her hair, and she reached for his hand. He stiffened. "This is nice," he said flatly, offering a perfunctory squeeze before slipping his hand free. Astraea watched his retreating back, a familiar ache twisting inside her. Brunch at a quiet cafe in Sausalito, poached eggs, saffron hollandaise, was similarly muted. Solon scrolled through market reports on his phone, barely tasting his meal. When he finally looked up, his smile was polite but remote. "We should get back," he said. She forced a smile in return as they drove home in silent tension. Nights deep in the distance. Their master bedroom, decorated in calming neutrals, felt cavernous. Solon washed up at the glass-encased vanity while she prepared for bed. He slipped between cool linens and closed his eyes within seconds. Astraea lay awake, listening to the muffled hum of Bay Bridge traffic far below. She turned, reached for his hand, met only empty sheets. She pressed her back into the mattress, phoned a friend in tears, and whispered about the perfect facade they'd built and how it was crumbling. No designer decor, no grand cathedral, no lavish reception could bridge the gap of withheld emotion. Colleagues admired their social calendar, charity galas at the Young Museum, board events at the Asian Art Museum, but none knew Solon's embracing gesture felt mechanical, like part of a polished act. Astraea's laughter in public masked internal grief. At auction fundraisers, she stood beside him, paddle poised, but inside felt like a spectator to her own life. When the final gavel fell, she clicked her paddle with half-hearted energy, searching the crowd for a spark of affection. Solon excused himself to network, leaving her beneath the chandelier's cold glow. Her smile wilted. She sipped her champagne, tasting only bubbles and regret. This was their marriage: glittering events, flawless receptions, warm smiles, and an existence devoid of intimacy. The distance between them stretched like a canyon, carved by their own indifferent routines. While the world gushed over their seemingly perfect union, Astraea and Solon lived parallel lives, a duet in which neither voice reached the other. Under the glossy veneer of champagne toasts and wedding dress memories, their hearts had grown parched. They moved through society functions as partners in name only, each day dimming the flame that once illuminated their shared journey. In a city defined by endless horizons and the promise of new beginnings, their greatest challenge lay ahead: whether to rediscover one another or let their marriage fade into dust. Astraea never imagined a quest for family could span a continent. Yet here she was, disembarking in Nashville's humid summer dusk, her mind racing with hope and fear. Clutching a faded photograph of her long-lost twin sister Celine, she navigated exit 209 off I-40. Heading toward the modest bungalow in East Nashville where her uncle Selim had lived since Celine's tragic passing 4 years earlier. In that photo, Celine's dark curls framed a bright smile as she cradled her daughter Nyx, then only 18 months old. The intervening years had been marked by agonizing silence. No letters, no calls. Only the echo of Astraea's unanswered questions. Pulling into the driveway, Astraea spotted Selim's midnight blue Toyota parked beside a scraggly dogwood tree. The house, a weathered clapboard cottage with peeling sage-green paint, looked unchanged since she'd last seen it at Celine's funeral. She hesitated on the porch, inhaling jasmine and honeysuckle as twilight deepened. The door swung open before she could knock. Selim stood framed in the threshold, his once auburn hair now flecked with silver, eyes the same warm hazel that had comforted her after their parents' deaths. He held a toddler in one arm. Nyx's dark curls and wide brown eyes mirrored Celine's own, all innocence and wonder. "Aunt Astraea?" Selim's voice trembled, a mixture of relief and guarded joy. Nyx squirmed, her tiny hand reaching for Astraea's face. "This is my daughter, Nyx." He stepped aside, the child's trust bridging 4 years of absence.
"Come in."
Inside, the living room smelled of fresh cinnamon bread cooling on a wire rack. Family photos lined the mantel. Celine and Selim as children, Celine holding Nyx at her baptism, Selim tenderly cradling the infant. Astraea felt tears prick her eyes. She knelt to embrace Nyx, whose quiet trust melted the years of separation. Selim poured iced tea into mismatched tumblers, gesturing toward an overstuffed sofa. They reunited as siblings, sharing an ocean of grief and relief in a single embrace. Later, the trio gathered in Selim's small kitchen, mint green vinyl chairs around a formica table. Nyx dozed in her crib upstairs while Astraea unraveled the story as she knew it: Celine's promising architecture career in Seattle, the accident that claimed her life but spared her daughter, Selim's tireless years of single parenthood. Each detail broke Selim's stoic facade. "I never told you," he rasped, voice cracking, "because I thought the grief would kill you or me." He recounted the court battles, the nights spent pacing the hardwood floors, the first time Nyx called him daddy. Despite his devotion, he confessed loneliness. "She needs her mother's guidance. You were more than an aunt. You're Celine's other half." Astraea's chest tightened. She reached for Selim's hand. "I need to be here, for her and for us." A new purpose flickered within her: to rebuild the family that fate had fractured. Over the next days, Astraea immersed herself in Nashville life. She helped Selim repaint Nyx's pastel bedroom, tucking plush hedgehogs and watercolor prints into place. Nyx giggled as Astraea braided her hair into pigtails, humming a nursery rhyme their grandmother once sang. For the first time since Celine's funeral, Astraea felt anchored to something more than memory. By midweek, they began formal steps to secure joint guardianship. The courthouse appointment loomed large. Astraea practiced her oath: to love, protect, and guide Nyx through life. Anxiety flickered in Selim's hazel eyes. He worried her arrival might unsettle the legal status he'd fought so hard to establish. But Astraea's resolve only strengthened. She had spent a lifetime imagining this moment. She would not falter. On the morning of the hearing, Nix clutched her handmade doll as they approached the historic Davidson County Courthouse. Red brick glowed in dawn's light, a rose vine clinging to one corner of the facade. Inside, oak benches and marble pillars housed the silent weight of countless decisions. Astraea and Selim presented their petition to the judge, supported by character references from neighbors, pediatricians, and family friends. Nix sat on Selim's lap, wide-eyed but unfazed, as the judge respectfully reviewed their file. When the gavel fell in their favor, relief and triumph coursed through the courtroom. Nix let out a jubilant laugh, burying her face in Astraea's shoulder. Selim clapped, tears glistening. Astraea held Nix close, promising aloud, "I will always keep you safe, my darling." Legal papers inked their new reality. Nix would grow up under the care of her aunt and her uncle, a life secured by love rather than blood alone. Returning home, Astraea and Selim reorganized their schedules and their hearts to make room for each other. They converted the spare room into Astraea's home office, where she began consulting on remote architecture projects, blending her career with family duties. Selim took evening shifts so Astraea could tuck Nix into bed, reading Celine's favorite children's stories until the toddler's eyes grew heavy. They shared late-night coffee on the back porch, tracing constellations and recalling childhood memories of Celine's laughter echoing through their parents' old Vermont farmhouse. Weekends transformed into family adventures. For Nix's third birthday, they hosted a Pirates Cove party in a sunlit park, complete with treasure hunts and strawberry-frosted cupcakes. The delight on Nix's face as she discovered gold coins by a sandbox was a balm to Astraea's heart. A summer picnic by Percy Warner Park's lake followed, where Astraea and Selim built sandcastles with Nix, dumping pebbles onto moats while her giggles filled the air. Each moment wove fresh threads into their shared tapestry, slowly healing the old wound. As autumn's first chill swept through Nashville, Astraea enrolled Nix in a French immersion preschool. On the first day, Nix tightened her grip on Astraea's hand before marching inside with Selim at her side. Astraea lingered by the window, watching her niece's confident stride past colorful murals and alphabet blocks. Pride swelled within her chest. Here, Nix would flourish, nurtured by two devoted guardians. Later, over pumpkin spice lattes at a cozy cafe on 12th Avenue, Astraea and Selim toasted their journey. "To family found, to futures unwritten," Selim said, raising his cup. Astraea smiled, the fragrance of cinnamon and memory mingling in the cool air. They spoke of holiday plans, selecting Nix's first Christmas tree, baking sugar cookies, and driving around to see twinkling lights. When winter's hush finally settled, Astraea gifted Nix a snow globe depicting the Golden Gate Bridge, an homage to Astraea's own childhood by the bay. Nix shook it exuberantly, watching miniature flakes swirl around tiny towers. Astraea brushed her cheek, whispering, "Your mommy loved snow." Nix pressed her palm to the glass, eyes wide with wonder. Selim stood behind them, hand on Astraea's shoulder. A silent circle of three souls bound by blood and love. Extended family visits added further warmth. Astraea's parents and grandparents flew in from Vermont, hugging Nix with tears and laughter. They brought heirloom quilts and photo albums full of Celine's childhood snapshots. At the Thanksgiving table, they shared memories, passing the casserole dishes while Nix sat on Astraea's lap. Champlin butternut squash pie. Each spoke an anecdote, Celine's penchant for bedtime stories, her fearless climbing of apple trees, rekindled her presence among them. In the evenings, Astraea and Selim carved out time for each other. They cooked dinners together in the cozy kitchen, stir-fried vegetables, spicy Cajun fish from the farmer's market, then sipped local craft beers on the porch swing. Between diaper changes and design drafts, they rediscovered simple joys, card games by lamplight, impromptu serenades as Selim strummed his guitar. Slow Sunday mornings curled beneath a quilt reading classic children's tales to Nix. Spring arrived, and with it, new family traditions. They planted a dogwood tree in the front yard, its dark pink blossoms a tribute to Celine's spirit. Astraea carefully dug the hole, supervising Nix's application of water. A brass plaque at the base read, "For Celine, whose love grows in our hearts." When the tree bloomed weeks later, Nix danced beneath the petals as Astraea and Selim held hands, silent tears mingling with laughter. In those quiet, everyday moments, tucking Nix in at night, Selim's gentle goodnight kiss, Astraea's whispered lullabies in Celine's favorite tune, Astraea discovered the true meaning of family. It was not defined by name or degree of kinship, but by shared memories, steadfast support, and unwavering devotion. Together, they carried Celine's legacy forward in Nix's bright eyes and fearless laughter. By the time Nix celebrated her 4th birthday, in a backyard scavenger hunt under the dogwood's first pink blossoms, Astraea and Selim had forged a new equilibrium. They balanced work deadlines with school recitals, architectural renderings with bedtime rhymes. Astraea's home office walls displayed sketches of future blueprints alongside Nix's finger-painted rainbows. Selim's study held volumes of children's literature and technical journals side by side. On warm summer evenings, the three of them walked down the neighborhood's oak-lined streets to fetch ice cream, waving hello to neighbors who now greeted Nix as Miss Nix, rather than the little girl next door. Astraea and Selim exchanged contented smiles, grateful that distance and grief had not broken their bonds, but had, through perseverance, strengthened them. In reclaiming her niece, and, through Nix, honoring her sister, Astraea learned that love could span absence, that healing often emerges from shared pain, and that family is woven from both memory and hope. Together with Selim and Nix, she embarked on a new chapter in Nashville, a life shaped not by the scars of the past, but by the promise of tomorrow. Their home, once echoing with loss, now resonated with laughter, lullabies, and the unbreakable music of bloodlines reconnected. In the soft glow of early spring, Nashville's blossoms unfurled their petals across the city, and within the Westwood gray household on 8th Avenue, a new chapter of warmth and affection quietly took root. Astraea and Selim had settled into a gentle routine that revolved entirely around young Nix, whose bright laughter had become the melody of their lives. Each morning, the aroma of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon drifted from the kitchen, a ritual that marked the start of their day as a family. Astraea would rise first, tiptoeing past Selim's side of the bed to slip into a lightweight cardigan before rounding the corner into the open kitchen. There, Selim already stood by the stove, whisking pancakes with focused care. He looked up with a tired but genuine smile framed by his rumpled hair. "Good morning, love," he said, sliding a small stack of fluffy silver-dollar pancakes onto a cheerful yellow plate. Nix's sleepy eyes fluttered open at the sound of her father's voice, and she toddled in, clutching her favorite plush hedgehog. The moment she spotted the pancakes, her face lit up. "Daddy," she squealed, stretching up for a hug. Astraea joined the embrace. "Good morning, baby," she murmured into Nix's damp curls. Over plates of pancakes drizzled with maple syrup, the three of them savored the simple joy of togetherness. Astraea and Selim would trade stories about the day ahead, Astraea's remote design consultations, Selim's genealogy research into their family's roots in Vermont, and Nix would nod sagely, occasionally inserting her own toddler commentary, "More syrup. Play outside." When Nix's first toddler cold struck, the household transformed into a haven of comfort. One damp Tuesday afternoon, Nix woke with a scratchy cough and rosy cheeks. Astraea scooped her up from her play mat, concern knitting her brow as she loaded a humidifier with warm mist. Selim rummaged through the medicine cabinet for saline drops and soft tissues, while Nix clung to her mother's neck. Astraea tucked Nix onto the couch, propping pillows behind her small frame, then returned to the kitchen for a pot of chicken, ginger soup simmering in a cast-iron Dutch oven. As the savory steam unfurled, Selim sat beside Astraea on the living room couch, brushing Nix's fingertips gently with a warm washcloth. "Here you go, pumpkin," he cooed, dabbing her cheeks. Nix sniffled, then offered him a wan smile. Astraea carried a big mug of soup to Selim's lap and placed it on the coffee table, the woody scent of ginger and garlic filling the room. "I remember Celine used to love this," Astraea whispered, voice wavering. Selim nodded. It was her go-to when she was under the weather. They both watched as Nix took her first spoonful, eyes widening before she giggled, broth dribbling down her chin. Over the next several days, this ritual unfolded each morning. Soup from Selim, chicken noodle from Astraea, steam rising in puffs from Nix's bowl. Bedtime became an elaborate ceremony. Selim ran a lukewarm bath scented with lavender. Astraea gathered soft washcloths and Nix's cherished rubber duck. The two parents traded gentle splashes and playful squeaks as they washed Nix, who squealed in delight at each rinse. Toweling off, they wrapped her in a fluffy hooded towel, then carried her upstairs to her pastel bedroom. In her room, the walls were hung with watercolor prints of Vermont forests and framed childhood photos of Celine. A mobile of origami cranes swayed above the crib, each fold a whisper of family history. Astraea and Selim sat on either side of Nix's twin-sized bed, reading from Goodnight Moon. Astraea's voice quivered with emotion as she narrated the familiar lines. "Goodnight air. Goodnight noises everywhere." Selim applied a dab of menthol rub to Nix's temples and then kissed her forehead. As Nix's eyes fluttered closed, Astraea and Selim exchanged a look of tender exhaustion. This was what they had built together, a cocoon of love, healing, and quiet devotion. Weekends were devoted entirely to adventure. One Saturday morning, the trio piled into Selim's Toyota, dogwood blossoms framing the driveway. Nix wore her rain boots and a bright yellow raincoat, though the sky held only a faint thread of drizzle. Their destination, the Nashville Zoo at Grassmere. Astraea and Selim navigated winding paths fringed with azalea bushes, bursting in pink and white. Nix's delighted shrieks echoed as she pressed her face against the glass of the tiger habitat, eyes wide at the striped cat's graceful prowl. Selim lifted her high so she could touch the wire mesh under close supervision, and Astraea captured the moment on her phone, Nix's bright grin against the tiger's amber eyes. They lingered by the otter exhibit, where sleek bodies darted through the water. "Look, Nix," Astraea coaxed softly. Selim stood behind her, arms looped around her waist as they both gazed at the playful pair. "Communication," he said. "Mom and Dad teaching little otter how to swim." Nix nodded solemnly, as though she perfectly understood the analogy. By midday, they settled at a picnic table shaded by a grand oak. Selim unpacked chicken salad sandwiches, Caesar salad, and cold lemonade. Nix clapped her hands. "Sandwich," she exclaimed. Astraea smiled, leaning her head on Selim's shoulder as they watched Nix devour her meal. The breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming magnolias. It was a perfect symphony of spring, a reaffirmation of their new life together. In the afternoons, they explored local bakeries and libraries. On a project-heavy Saturday for Astraea, Selim took Nix to the Nashville Public Library's children's wing. The bright, carpeted room brimmed with picture books, foam blocks, and colorful rugs. Selim sat cross-legged on the floor, Nix in his lap, as they pored over The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Each page turned to animated squeals. More fruit. Butterfly. Meanwhile, Astraea worked from a nearby cafe table, her laptop balanced beside a latte, the hum of productivity tempered by the glow of contentment knowing her daughter and partner were forging their own bond. By late afternoon, they reconvened at the nearby riverfront park. The Cumberland River shimmered under the setting sun as rowers glided past. Carrera bikes shifted through gears on the paved greenway. Selim sat on a bench, Nix perched on his knee, while Astraea returned from a quick run. She joined them, wrapping her arms around both. "That Saturday," Nix declared, snuggling into her mother. Astraea's heart expanded. This was the tapestry they were weaving, one stitch at a time, in laughter, care, and simple routines. Even larger celebrations became extensions of their daily care. For Nix's 4th birthday, they organized a small garden party in their backyard. White lanterns hung from birch limbs, a wooden table displayed pastel cupcakes, fruit kebabs, and Nix's favorite coconut-flavored iced tea. Friends from Astraea's architecture circle and Selim's genealogy group mingled, but the center of attention was always Nix. She wore a floral sundress, crown of daisies in her curls, presiding over her treasures. Selim led a scavenger hunt. Astraea handed out adult-sized cardboard crowns, painted with glitter. And Nix's giggles rose above the hum of conversation. That night, as they gathered exhausted around her bedroom, Nix hugged each parent in turn, murmuring, "Best birthday ever." Astraea and Selim exchanged gratified smiles. They had created a life rich in ritual, affection, and shared joy. When winter's first frost brushed Nashville, the small family's bond only warmed. Nix wrapped her mittened hand in Astraea's as they trekked through Centennial Park's Grecian columns, watching geese skim the frozen lily pond. Astraea paused to kiss Selim's cheek, breath visible in the crisp air. On their return, they sipped hot cocoa by the fireplace, reading The Snowy Day, Celine's beloved children's classic, by the crackling flames. Selim's arm around Astraea's shoulders, Nix murmuring, "I love you both," created a tableau of gratitude and fulfillment. Throughout it all, Astraea and Selim found themselves falling in love not just with each other, but with the life they'd built around Nix. Their relationship matured from careful co-guardianship into a partnership of deep understanding. Selim learned to anticipate Astraea's deadlines. Brewing extra coffee before her dawn conference calls, Astraea discovered the solace of a quiet shoulder under Selim's steady humor.
Intimat a moments multiplia.
Cooking dinner together to Nix's bedtime playlist, slow Sunday morning breakfasts in pajamas. Evenings spent planning future travel, perhaps a trip to Celine's favorite spot in Vermont or a family summer road trip along the Pacific coast. By the time spring's full bloom returned to Nashville, Astraea realized that love had grown anew, rooted in the unlikeliest soil of loss and longing. She watched Selim cradle Nix in the rocking chair on the porch, dusk settling around them, and felt a joy deeper than any she'd known before. Their blended family, once fractured by tragedy, now pulsed with life, laughter, and the promise of countless tomorrows. In caring for Nix, and caring for one another, Astraea and Selim had discovered that new love doesn't simply replace old, it emerges alongside it, enriched by shared history and the unwavering devotion that blossoms when three hearts beat together as one. A low gray ceiling draped itself over the campus of Little Oaks Montessori as Family Day began under a steady April drizzle. The sound of little rubber boots splashing in puddles mottled the air along the leafy drive. Parents guided toddlers under colorful umbrellas while teachers in green rain slickers welcomed each family with bright smiles. Selim, Astraea, and Nix arrived clutching a crimson umbrella that barely shielded them from misting drops. Nix, wearing her favorite sunflower yellow raincoat, hopped the lawn cheerfully, her tiny boots kicking up miniature rainbows in the wet pavement. Inside the oak-paneled foyer, the warmth of soft lighting and polished wood greeted them. Handmade artwork, finger-painted leaves in autumn hues, watercolor rain showers, adorned the walls. Nix raced ahead, squealing with delight as she spotted her classmates lining up for the opening circle. Astraea hung the umbrella and smoothed back Nix's damp curls, then turned to Selim with a grateful smile. He squeezed her hand, brushing a stray raindrop from her cheek. "Ready for the big surprise?" he whispered, voice low with excitement. Astraea's heart fluttered. She had no idea what he meant, but she trusted him completely. In the circle of tiny desks and cushioned floor mats, families gathered around low wooden tables. Each table held trays of sensory activities, colored rice, smooth river stones, wooden blocks painted in primary colors. Nix hopped onto the teacher's lap, eager to show off her latest construction, a precarious tower that teetered before tumbling in a cascade of red and blue blocks. Inside, Parents whispered greetings and exchanged pleasantries. Astraea bent to scoop Nyx into her lap, brushing wet strands from her daughter's forehead. "Did you build that by yourself?" she asked with pride. "Me do it." Nyx beamed, pointing at the scattered blocks. Selim knelt beside them, ruffling Nyx's rain-slicked hair. "That's our little architect," he said softly. Astraea's eyes brimmed with tears of joy. Here was the life they'd fought to protect, blossoming in simple wonder. After the building activity, the families moved outdoors to the covered amphitheater, a circular stage ringed by benches and sheltered by a metal canopy. Raindrops glinted on the metal roof like strings of pearls. The head teacher, Ms. Alvarez, invited everyone to form a wide semicircle around the stage. "Today," she began, "we celebrate our Montessori community, the children, the families, and the bonds that hold us together." Her warm tone cut through the patter of rain, and children settled, cross-legged, clutching miniature wooden signs they had painted that morning. Nyx's sign read "Family First," painted in thick strokes of purple and green. Astraea and Selim joined hands behind Nyx's back, guiding her to stand center stage with her classmates. Selim's palm pressed gently to Astraea's lower back, a reassuring anchor. As Ms. Alvarez called families up one by one to offer brief words of gratitude, Selim felt the time was right. He draped an arm around Astraea, lifting her slightly above the crowd so she could see better, and walked her to the center with Nyx between them. The rain intensified, pattering against the canopy and running off its edges in tiny waterfalls. Selim turned to face Astraea, trenchcoat collar damp, hair darkened by moisture. He brushed a wet strand behind her ear, his hazel eyes shining with passion. Astraea held her breath as the world seemed to slow. Nyx held both their hands, the other little faces watched in wide-eyed curiosity. And the Montessori benches lay empty except for eager parents leaning forward to see. Selim reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. A collective murmur rippled through the families gathered under the pavilion. Nyx straightened, her eyes glittering with anticipation. Astraea's heart thundered. The box snapped open to reveal a delicate ring, a slender band of white gold set with a single pale blue sapphire flanked by 2 tiny diamonds. The gems caught the light of the overcast sky, shimmering like raindrops. Astraea's breath caught in her throat.
Khi em đã cho anh gia đình này, Kalumbigan, his voice today thao emotion quiver at it at. Anh muốn trao cho em một lời hứa.
Nyx, Daddy wants to ask Mommy a special question. He turned to Nyx, who nodded solemnly, her sunflower coat glowing against the gray. Selim faced Astraea again. "Astraea Westwood, my partner, my love, my family, will you marry me?" For a suspended moment, all sound but the rain fell away. Astraea's eyes filled with tears as she bent to Nyx's level, brushing a wet strand from her daughter's cheek. "Nyx, look," she whispered. "Daddy put a ring on Mommy." Nyx's face broke into the biggest grin, and she jumped up and down, shouting, "Dad put a ring on Mom." Laughter and applause erupted all around. Teachers and slickers clapped, parents rose to their feet, colleagues offered cheers and tearful hugs. Astraea, voice trembling, glanced at Selim. The rain slid down her cheeks, mingling with her tears. She opened her mouth, the ring heavy in her palm, and nodded. "Yes," she managed to say, voice rich with emotion. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Selim slipped the ring onto her finger, his thumb brushing her palm as he secured it. The sapphire gleamed like a promise under the Nashville sky. Nyx hopped into Astraea's arms, hugging her mother around the neck. "Mommy's a princess now," she squealed, patting the ring. Astraea kissed Nyx's forehead, then turned to Selim, wrapping her arms around him. The pavilion echoed with cheers, the stormy sky softening to a gentle mist. Those brief moments, ring in hand, daughter in arms, loved ones gathered close, made the storm feel like a blessing. Astraea leaned against Selim, forehead to forehead, and whispered, "I love you." He raised his hand to cup her cheek, rainwater dripping from his lashes. "And I love you," he replied, voice muffled by emotion. As the applause died down, Ms. Alvarez stepped forward with a basket of paper lanterns. Each family received one to light and release as a symbol of community and new beginnings. Astraea and Selim ignited their lantern together, Nyx watching in awe as the paper glow warmed her face. They released it into the gray sky, where it drifted upward, a soft beacon among the falling rain. The families then moved under the covered courtyard for a shared picnic, artisanal sandwiches, homemade quiches, and hot chocolate served in insulated flasks. Astraea sat between Selim and Nyx on a bench, the new ring glittering at her side as she nursed a steaming cup. Nyx nestled into her lap, babbling excitedly about the ring and the lantern and how much she loved school. Selim draped an arm around Astraea's shoulders, pulling her close as they listened to Nyx's animated retelling of the proposal. By the time the drizzle eased into a gentle mist, laughter and chatter wove through the courtyard. Astraea looked up at the clearing sky, a small patch of blue peeking through gray clouds. The rain had brought them to this moment, an unplanned ceremony of love, witnessed by strangers who had become family. The Montessori teachers joined hands with parents, singing a simple blessing in both English and Vietnamese, a tribute to Astraea's heritage.
Cho mái ấm trọn vẹn, tình yêu mãi bền lâu.
May this family's love endure forever. Later that afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds, the newly engaged couple walked home hand in hand, Nyx skipping between them, her laughter ringing clear. Astraea fingered the sapphire ring on her finger, still marveling that it had found its place under Nashville's spring rain. Selim pointed out a rain-soaked dogwood blooming by the sidewalk, its petals glinting in fresh sunlight. Just like our love, he said softly, bright after the storm. Astraea smiled and leaned on his shoulder. Yes, their love would be that dogwood, resilient, blossoming after every storm, forever rooted in the soil they had nurtured together. And with Nyx's joyful song carrying them forward, they stepped into their future, untouched by clouds, warmed by the promise of an ever-deepening bond. A clear, warm evening settled over Nashville as late summer's golden light waned into soft pastels. After months of rain-softened storms and sunlit triumphs, the Westwood, gray household glowed with unspoken excitement. Tonight, all three members of this newly formed family, Astraea, Selim, and little Nyx, would stand together beneath a canopy of live oaks and lanterns, while somewhere down the hill, the city's music row pulsed with the promise of new beginnings. Inside the cozy living room, adorned with watercolor forest prints and clusters of family photographs, Astraea smoothed her silk dress and brushed a loose curl from her face. Beside her, Selim fastened a crisp linen jacket, glancing at her with affectionate pride. Nyx darted between them, wearing her favorite tulle skirt and clutching her stuffed hedgehog like an honored guest. 3, 2, 1, she counted down with glee, as if it were already showtime. Ready, Selim whispered to Astraea. She nodded, her heart fluttering with anticipation. Together, they guided Nyx out the front door toward the driveway, where Solon Gray awaited, handsome in a tailored charcoal suit. Though their own marriage had once felt barren, Solon had come to embody a gracious mentor and steadfast friend, his blessing essential to this chapter's promise. He smiled warmly at the trio. Congratulations, Solon began, voice soft under the rustling oak leaves. He stepped forward, folding Astraea into a brief embrace. I've watched you both build something true here. Astraea, Selim, your family is beautiful. Astraea's eyes glistened as she replied, Thank you, Solon. Your support means the world. Her gaze shifted to Nyx, nestled giggling on Solon's knee. And thank you for everything, for Celine, for Nyx, for this moment. She pressed a gentle kiss to Solon's cheek, an act of deep gratitude. Solon nodded, blinking back emotion. Celine would have been proud, he said, looking at Nyx's smiling face. And I know she is. You've given her legacy a loving home. He placed a loving hand on Nyx's shoulder. Take good care of her, both of you. We promise, Selim said, voice steady but tender. He extended his hand, and Solon took it firmly. The two men stood clasped in a handshake that spoke of respect, understanding, and shared history. For a moment, the three adults formed a small circle of affection and remembrance. Nyx, sensing the solemnity, glanced between them. "Mommy, Daddy, Grandpa Solon," she chirped. Solon bent to whisper in her ear, making her giggle. Astraea and Selim exchanged relieved smiles. This was closure, affirmation, and the clear delineation of their new family. As the last rays of sun dipped behind distant hills, Solon stepped back with a bright grin. "Well then," he said, "I believe our newly engaged couple has a final tradition ahead." He gestured toward a sleek black convertible parked at the end of the driveway, its top folded neatly, gleaming under fairy lights strung overhead. "A convertible ride?" Astraea laughed in surprise and delight. "In Nashville?" Selim's eyebrows lifted in excited disbelief. Nyx's eyes sparkled. "Road trip," she declared. Solon opened the driver's door. "One final gesture," he said. "Music Row tonight is calling your names. Take the long way through town, it's time-honored tradition." He lifted Nyx into the front passenger seat, buckling her safely in. Then Astraea and Selim climbed in behind her, shoulders brushing in familial warmth. Solon slid into the driver's seat. The engine rumbled to life, low and contented, as neighbors peeked from porches to wave them on. The convertible rolled down the wet-scented asphalt, radiator humming like a lullaby. Above, strings of lantern light refracted off glistening leaves. Below, headlights danced in pools of shadow and glow. Their first stop was the neighborhood's leafy boulevard, where Spanish moss draped ancient oaks like bridal veils. Nyx peered between the windshield and the curving hood, squealing as a raccoon family darted across the street. Selim reached forward to steady her, tickling her ribs until her laughter soared like bells. Astraea pressed her palm to the door's cool metal, feeling the car's rhythm under her fingertips. From there, Solon drove them toward downtown, past rows of red brick Victorians repurposed as hip cafes and galleries. The humid breeze carried the aroma of coffee, sizzling street food, and fresh paint. Astraea rested her head against Selim's shoulder, and he slipped an arm around her waist. Nyx dozed between them, her hedgehog tucked under one arm. As they approached 17th Avenue South, the pulsing heart of Music Row, neon signs flickered on. Soundcheck Studios, Harmonic House, Midnight Jukebox. A lone saxophone riff drifted from an open window upstairs. The convertible slowed, and the world outside felt hushed in reverence. Solon steered onto the cobblestone side street that framed the legendary recording houses. "There it is," Solon announced, voice hushed. "The birthplace of countless songs and your new life serenade." Astraea gazed out the side window, eyes wide. Vintage microphones stood guard behind tinted glass. Brass plaques commemorated hit records, and murals celebrated songwriters who had spilled their souls onto polished floors. She felt a shiver of wonder. "It's magical," she whispered. "Just like you too," Solon replied softly, glancing in the rearview mirror at Astraea and Selim. "Keep writing your own melody." Selim gripped Astraea's hand, his thumb stroking hers. "We will," he vowed. "Every note, every refrain, will be one of love." With that, Solon accelerated gently, the convertible gliding around corners as Music Row's neon glow painted their faces in shifting pinks and blues. Street musicians playing guitars and mandolins lined the sidewalks, waving as the car passed. Nyx stirred, rubbing her eyes before grinning at the glittering spectacle. They drove a circuit that traced the district's storied blocks, recording studio after studio. Historic brick facades now home to indie labels and retro vinyl shops. Astraea leaned forward, craning her neck to soak in each architectural detail: the soaring arched doorways, the old metal shutters propped open, the vintage marquee letters spelling out legendary album titles. The city's pulse echoed their own, a blend of tradition and reinvention, a testament to enduring stories and new voices. On one corner, a brass band spilled onto the sidewalk, trumpets gleaming in the dusky light. Solon slowed the car, And the trio listened as the band launched into a slow, sultry jazz standard, Summertime. Astraea closed her eyes, allowing the warm horn notes to flood her memory. Selim draped an arm around her, pulling her closer as the cool night air caressed their warm skin. Nyx banged her hedgehog-topped hand on the car's door, delighted by the music. When the song ended, the band tipped their hats and resumed playing, their notes drifting skyward like liberated birds. Solon nodded in appreciation, then turned the car toward the city's gentle incline. Heading back home, the convertible accelerated on smooth pavement, leaving behind the illuminated recording studios, their legacy now woven into Astraea and Selim's own story. At the bottom of Music Row, under strings of vintage Edison bulbs, they paused. Solon killed the engine. Silence fell, pure and expectant. Astraea blinked, letting the night's magic sink in. Stars shimmered overhead, and the distant skyline glowed with promise. She turned to Selim, eyes brimming, and kissed him softly on the cheek. Selim returned the gesture, smiling. Nyx piped up from the back seat, already half asleep. "More music tomorrow?" she murmured. Selim ruffled her hair. "Always, pumpkin." Solon opened the passenger door for Astraea. "Congratulations." "You too," he said, voice warm. "May your life together be as rich and enduring as the songs born of this street." Astraea stepped onto the pavement, pulling Nyx into her arms. Selim joined them, and together the three hugged Solon goodbye. "Thank you for everything," Astraea whispered. "For Celine, for Nyx, and for guiding us here." Solon nodded, tears glinting. "I'll always be here," he promised, "as your friend, your brother, and your champion." They watched as Solon drove away, the convertible's taillights fading into the night. Astraea, Selim, and Nyx, linked by fate and love, turned toward home, footsteps echoing on the wet cobblestones. When they reached their front porch, Astraea tucked Nyx under her arm and unlocked the door. Inside, the amber glow of lamps welcomed them. Astraea set Nyx on the floor beside her stuffed hedgehog, then watched as Selim lit the fireplace. The crackling flames filled the room with warmth and the faint scent of burning oak. Astraea sank onto the sofa, Selim beside her, and pulled Nyx onto her lap. In the hush that followed, as embers glowed and firelight danced on their faces, Astraea closed her eyes. Every trial, every tear, every triumphant moment had led to this soft sanctuary. She opened her arms to envelop her new family. Selim rested his head against her shoulder. Nyx snuggled between them, eyelids heavy as the night's embrace deepened. Astraea traced patterns on Selim's palm as she whispered, "We did it. We're home." Selim squeezed her hand, the sapphire promise gleaming on her finger. "We are," he agreed. "And tomorrow, and all our tomorrows, we'll keep building this song." Outside, the final notes of a distant saxophone drifted from Music Row, a gentle benediction. Inside, three hearts beat in tender harmony, their story a new refrain in Nashville's endless melody. And as sleep beckoned, Astraea let the warmth of their fulfillment wash over her, sure that their family's song was only just beginning. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistery Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.